Coming up today, South Africa consumer inflation slows to 4.1% year-on-year in September. Morocco to issue first international bond in 4 years in November. Plus, DP World chairman says Djibouti dispute hurt company's ability to borrow. Hello and welcome to Business Incorporated. I'm Chimizi Obi Iwawo. Let's start off with the markets where most stocks in Africa were mostly low at intraday. Here in Nigeria, the main index traded lower at 0.12%, while the JSE index in South Africa was also down 0.74% at intraday. And in Egypt, the market slipped 0.74%. However, the Kenyan bourse closed its trading day on Tuesday up 0.65%. And in the Middle East, markets were mostly mixed at intraday. The Abu Dhabi index rose 0.31%, while the Dubai index dips 0.27% at intraday. The Qatari Stock Exchange slipped further at 0.21%, while the Saudi Exchange rose slightly by 0.15% at intraday. And European stocks traded mostly lower in early trade after British lawmakers forced Prime Minister Boris Johnson to pause the progression of his Brexit deal. Now, there are a slew of corporate earnings expected as well, and that's where I will start my conversations with Chelsea today. Hello, Chelsea. Good afternoon. So let's begin with the earnings. German auto giant Daimler is expected to report its results for the third quarter tomorrow. Now, the Mercedes-Benz maker has been struggling with a global slowdown in car sales. What can investors expect? Well, we seem to have technical issues. There we'll get back to Chelsea as soon as possible. All right, in the UK, lawmakers on Tuesday night voted in principle for Johnson's withdrawal agreement bill to proceed through Parliament, but rejected the Prime Minister's plans to get it approved within 3 days. For an update, let's talk to Juliana. Hello, Juliana. Good afternoon. Any idea how much political progress or otherwise has been made so far today in the ongoing business of Brexit?
Well, where are we, Chimase? No man's land is really the only answer I can give you. Prime Minister's questions have just wrapped up. And of course, as can be expected, it was as fiery as ever. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, just really reiterating all of the comments he made yesterday evening. And that's that he has been speaking to EU 27 members, urging them to either not grant an extension past October the 31st, or an extension that's much shorter than the 31st of January. So now really all eyes are on Brussels, and we await to see whether or not an extension will be granted. We have heard from Jean-Claude Juncker and Donald Tusk, but it's not up to them. It's up to the heads of states. And we know that not just French President Emmanuel Macron, many other heads of states are sick to the back teeth of Brexit. And it is possible, though unlikely, that there would be a veto and that no extension will be given. So the Brexit process hangs.
Well, I guess it's one of those days when technology can actually fail you. Let's look at what's happening in Asia. There, the markets mostly fell today as developments on Brexit overnight meant the deadline for the UK to leave the EU would likely be delayed again. Among mainland Chinese stocks, the Shanghai Composite was down 0.43% to 2,941.62, while the Shenzhen Composite lost 0.79%. Closing at 1,618.40. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index tumbled 0.84% in afternoon trade. Australia's ASX 200 closed flat to 6,673.10. Japan's markets reopened after a holiday on Tuesday, with the Nikkei 225 rising 0.34% to close at 22,625.38, while South Korea's Kospi was down 0.39% to 2,080.62. And U.S. stock index futures were slightly lower this morning at around 4:45 a.m. Eastern Time. Dow futures slipped 23 points, indicating a negative open of more than 3 points. Futures on the S&P and Nasdaq were both marginally lower. The moves in pre-market trade came amid worries about the global tech sector. On the data front, the Federal Housing Finance Agency will release its house price index for August at around 9 a.m. Eastern Time. In corporate news, Boeing, Caterpillar, and Eli Lilly are among some of the major companies set to report earnings before the opening bell. Ford, Microsoft, and Tesla are among those scheduled to report their latest quarterly figures after market close. All right, let's look at back here on the African continent, still talking about the market, but this time the international bond market, where Morocco is planning its first international bond in 4 years in November, worth about $1 billion, but will wait before deciding on the exact amount, the currency, and of course the date of issue. Earlier this month, rating agency S&P upgraded Morocco's outlook from negative to stable while maintaining its BBB rating. Government debt is expected to stand at 66.2% of gross domestic product in 2019. Morocco is targeting a fiscal deficit of 3.5% of gross domestic product in 2020, the same as 2019. It expects economic growth of 3.7% next year, assuming an average cereals harvest of 7 million tons and an oil price of $67 a barrel. Now, the central bank and the International Monetary Fund have said they expect growth this year of 2.7% after poor rainfall affected crops. And South Africa's headline consumer inflation slowed to 4.1% year-on-year in September from 4.3% in August. Data from Statistics South Africa released today shows that on a month-on-month basis, price growth was flat at 0.3%, the same rate of increase as in the previous month. Core inflation, which excludes the prices of food, non-alcoholic beverages, petrol, and energy, slowed to 4% year-on-year in September versus 4.3% in August, while on a month-on-month basis, prices rose 0.2% compared with a 0.1% increase in the prior month. Ahead of the release of the data, the rand weakened, giving back some of the gains from the day before as investors took profits. Meanwhile, crisis hit South African power company Eskom has handed an additional 59 billion rand lifeline by Parliament on Tuesday, prompting criticism from opposition parties who described it as blank check. The special bill passed by Parliament to grant the funding was first proposed by Finance Minister Tito Mboweni in July as Eskom struggled to service its ballooning 450 billion rand debt pile and keep the lights on throughout 2019 as its creaking fleet of coal-fired plants buckled. Eskom unleashed another bout of nationwide blackouts last week following repeated power cuts in February and March, which dragged the economy into contraction. The multi-party standing committee on appropriation responsible for oversight of the bill failed to agree on the conditions and early in October opted to leave the finance minister's draft bill unchanged.